The Mitsubishi F-2 has one of the most controversial drama bait stories of any jet currently in War Thunder. It would be well beyond the scope of this video to go into the whole thing here, but the short version is that during the 1980s, the Japanese wanted to replace some of their older jet fighters. Fairly routine. However, this resulted in an epic level of political maneuverings by the United States to try and prevent Japan from launching a new domestic fighter program without some level of US involvement, both because they wanted to keep Japan as a customer for American planes, but also because they worried that whatever Japan might produce might be a serious competitor on the export market and would eat into the sales of American aircraft. After years of back and forth, several rounds of scandals, and significant compromises by the Japanese, the F-2 project was finalized in mid-1989. The deal involved a lot of technology transfer and split production work between Japan and the US. Now, despite some initial tension over the general design of the aircraft, an earlier proposal for a slightly enlarged F-16 was used as the basis for the new jet. The resulting F-2 first flew in 1995, entering service the following year. Despite being based on the F-16 with very obvious visual similarities, it really is a new aircraft. It's slightly larger in all dimensions, uses entirely different materials and construction techniques, has a totally new flight control system, its internal structure is different, and of course it has more modern radar and electronic systems in addition to a larger payload of weapons. After it entered service with Japan, the F-2 primarily replaced the F-4 Phantom and provided a significant upgrade in capabilities. The controversies didn't end, however, and the jet ended up running into significant cost overruns and continued to be a point of contention in the Japanese government for several reports that would later outline that it would have just been cheaper to buy modern foreign jets in the first place. In the end, just under 100 Mitsubishi F-2s were built, and the jet remains in service to this day. What we get in War Thunder is the F-2A, a jet fighter in Rank 8 of the Japanese tech tree at battle rating 13.7 for air and 12.7 for ground. The jet gets a fully modern ballistics computer and a very high-performance radar warning receiver that tracks into the K-band. Its radar is the JAPG-2. The stat card for this radar set is slightly misleading, but not in a bad way, and I'll get to that in a few minutes. It's an active electronically scanned array radar, and generally one of the best in the game as of making this review. It has multiple track while scan modes, ground MTI mode, and a mode for tracking ships. One thing the F-2 lacks is helmet-mounted targeting, which is a disadvantage up at the top tier, but you can offset that a bit by using its tall dogfight ACM frame, as you can see in some of the footage I included, specifically the close-up gunfights. For loadouts, you get a pretty good selection of weapons, but notably, your set of air-to-air missiles is limited to 4 radar, 4 heat seekers, which is a slightly below-average set of missile options for the top tier. Speaking of which, your dogfight missile is the AAM-3. This is a high-performance weapon with 40 Gs of pull, infrared countermeasures, and a low-smoke booster. It's not always great at high off-bore sight shots, but it's still very competitive against other dogfight missiles. For radar missiles, you start off with the AIM-7M. This is a fairly good version of the semi-active radar homing Sparrow missile, and you've probably seen it by now going up the tech tree. You'll replace it when you get done grinding upgrades. Your active radar missile is the AAM-4. This is fairly comparable to the AMRAAM, but has slightly better boost acceleration, but with a weaker sustainer. Its overall performance is somewhere in between the AIM-120A and C. For air-to-ground weapons, you get a variety of guided bombs, but I want to single out the GBU-62. This is an LJDAM that can use laser or satellite guidance, and it's a glide bomb, so it's got really good range. But just a reminder, the glide bombs on this plane are very slow, and it can take a while for them to reach the target. You also get the ASM-1 and ASM-2 anti-ship missiles. These are basically the same weapon, just with different guidance. Radar for the 1 and infrared for the 2. More about these towards the end of the review. With its flight performance, the F-2A is a little quirky. The acceleration is noticeably lower than most of the other top-tier jets, and its rate of climb is similarly a little below average. Both of these are also compounded by the drop tanks. Its dogfight agility is, again, kinda average. It's basically right in the middle of the pack, but one thing I noticed, and you can also notice in the footage, is that it pulls into excessive g-forces very suddenly at some airspeeds. And I know it's subjective, but it felt like pilot blackouts are more of an issue than in some of the other top-tier jets. All the footage in this review was recorded with a fully upgraded Ace pilot. A notable omission is the lack of an AOA limiter disable switch. The F2 doesn't get the Cobra button. Not a big deal, but I was a little surprised to find it missing on a very advanced top-tier fighter like this. Now, I want to take a moment to talk more about the drop tanks. The engine on this jet absolutely guzzles fuel, and astute viewers will notice from the footage that I'm generally taking more fuel than usual along with the full drop tanks, and I'm keeping the tanks longer than I might in some other jets. Yes, I know, along with everyone else, that the tanks kill your flight performance, but I want to explicitly mention that in preparing this review, I actually ran out of fuel in at least half a dozen matches from ditching the tanks too early. Experiment a bit and find a good fuel strategy for your particular playstyle. It was more of an issue for me in the F2 than in the other top-tier jets that I've flown recently. When you take this jet into air battles, there are some things to think about. First, its radar. This jet's radar is excellent in a dozen different ways. It has good range, it scans and tracks well, and importantly, it cuts down on the quantity of manually selectable radar modes. You only cycle through regular track while scan head-on, ground, and sea modes. That's it. So it ends up being less cumbersome to operate than some other top-tier radars. Also, the new sea mode is finally itemized on the radar display, which is a good quality of life addition. In terms of air combat, I didn't have a lot of luck using this jet for high-altitude BVR stuff. It has a great radar set, but it just doesn't have the acceleration and climb rate to stay competitive with some of the other BVR climbers early in a match. Now, in terms of close-up dogfighting, as you can see from the one-on-ones I included in the footage, the F2 absolutely can hold its own in a twisting dogfight. The real key is going to be incredibly careful throttle management and energy control in order to prevent overshoots while avoiding stallouts. Stuff like the Eurofighter and Rafale can, on paper, dunk on this thing in a dogfight, so your air combat maneuvering is going to have to be really on point. But if you don't screw up too badly, gunfights are winnable. I also want to reiterate the lack of helmet-mounted targeting, which, again, is a disadvantage. Try to use the tall and narrow ACM frame, as it can help lock up an opponent for AAM-3 slaving or EEGS targeting when you're in a turn fight. For ground attack, the jet is a fully competent multi-role fighter. The only issue it runs into is that all of its longer range weapons are glide bombs, and you may find that your targets are dying or moving behind buildings before your ordnance arrives, which can be pretty annoying. The anti-ship missiles on the F2 are actually usable against ships. They drop down and skim just above the water, which isn't really a good flight profile for, like, close air support, but they do reliably hit ships and can usually penetrate compartments. Notably, even with the infrared-guided ASM-2, you can't target these using the targeting pod. You need a radar track in order to fire. Visually, the F-2 is, well, kind of a beefed-up F-16. You get some custom paint jobs, but the default blue one looks great anyway. The afterburner effects are surprisingly good, and in general, this is just a great plane to have up on the screen. Landing the F-2 is pretty simple for top tier. You get a drag chute and can throw out the gear and flaps at around 460 kilometers an hour. No special caveats. The cockpit on the F-2 provides two huge MFDs, including a great weapon selection indicator, useful heads-up display, and excellent visibility. The only caveat is the lack of a helmet-mounted sight, but otherwise, this was a joy to fly in VR. To close out on the F-2A. This jet has an excellent radar set, its air-to-air missiles are fairly high performance, and it's got anti-ship missiles that actually work right. However, it's a little behind the raw power curve. It doesn't have a helmet-mounted sight, its close air support weapons are slow, and its loadouts don't let you mix and match air-to-air missiles as well as some of the other top-tier jets. The final verdict on the Mitsubishi F-2A is that, in my opinion, this is going to prove itself to be a fairly average overall fighter for top tier as of mid-2025. It can do most jobs fairly well, but it isn't really pushing the envelope with anything in particular. Still, it's fun to fly, and can be effective with just a little bit of practice. As always, thanks for watching.